Good morning and welcome to the Maryland Commission on African American History and Culture meeting scheduled for today, Monday, August the 7th, 2023 at the Morgan State University, University Center Boulevard, Suite 316. We're going to begin with our call to order. And for all commissioners present, if you could say present or here, that would be great. Chair Edwin T. Johnson.
Present.
Vice Chair Maya Davis. Commissioner Dr. Khalid Asset Ahmed.
Present.
Thank you. Commissioner Dion Banks. Commissioner Lori Bradford. Commissioner H. Russell Frisbee.
Present.
Commissioner Walter Gill. I know he was here. Commissioner Janice Curtis Green. Commissioner Kara Hunt.
Present.
Commissioner Philip J. Merrill.
Excused.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Jalen Murray.
Present.
Commissioner Brian Morrison.
Present.
Commissioner Barbara Pika.
Excused.
Thank you, sir.
He's in Ireland.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Robert Patterson. Commissioner Ada Pinkston.
Present.
Commissioner Hakeem Tajani.
Present.
Commissioner Reggie Turner.
Present.
Commissioner Eleanor Thompson. Commissioner Kennedy Wilson.
Present.
And Commissioner Wellesley Wood. To the public, to our chair, vice chair, and commissioners, you will find that the notice was sent out about today's public meeting on our commission website, the BDM website, as well as our local and national syndicates for today's meeting. And now I turn this meeting over to the wonderful and capable hands of our powerful leader, Chair Edwin T. Johnson. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We actually have two sets of minutes to be approved. So for the commissioners who were in office through June 5th, if I'll give you a couple of moments to review both sets of minutes, the minutes from Monday, April 3rd, which was overlooked and was not approved. So we need to have our minutes in order. And then the last public meeting, which was Monday, June 5th. So if Commissioner Turner and Frisbee, Dr. Gill, I think, stepped out of the room, can review it, and I'll entertain a motion for approval.
Motion for approval.
Is there a second? For properly moved and second, can we accept the minutes from Monday, the public meetings from Monday, April the 3rd, 2003, and Monday, June 5th, 2003? All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, that passed. Can you have the records reflect that, Mr. Herbert? Thank you. So welcome. We have 11 new commissioners, and it is an excited, enthusiastic pleasure for me to welcome you all to the Maryland Commission on African American History and Culture. And then we welcome you, our general public and audience, to the sacred campus of Morgan State University. And I like to say sacred campus because the commission was actually birthed out of Morgan State University. Our co-founders, Verda Freeman Welcome, was a member of the Morgan State University class of 1939, and Professor Benjamin Arthur Quarles was literally a scholarly rock star. Even today, long after his passing, anything that you want to do on Frederick Douglass, he was and remains, even posthumously, the foremost authority on Frederick Douglass and any scholarship on Frederick Douglass. And he was a legendary scholar on this campus for a number of years in the Department of History. there's literally history all around us, and it's just so appropriate that we host our first public meeting of the 23-24 year here. If you look just out that window, you can see Morgan's football field. And some of you know that as we approach the 60th anniversary of the 1963 March on Washington, some of you know that among his awards, Martin Luther King Jr. holds an honorary doctorate for Morgan. And on June the 2nd, 1958, there were excerpts of the I Have a Dream speech given as a commencement address here in 1958. So students at Morgan, or graduates of Morgan of that class and their family and friends, actually heard excerpts of the I Have a Dream speech 5 years before the rest of the world. So I say all of that so that you can have an appreciation for where you are. And actually just across the sidewalk where the Earl S. Richardson Library is located, that at one time was the old Murphy Fine Arts Building, where on March 28, 1962, Malcolm X debated a Morgan professor named August Meyer on black nationalism versus integration. So those were several pivotal figures, and I could go on and on and on, but welcome to Morgan State University. This is the only college campus in the nation that in its entirety has been designated a National Historic Treasure, and we are so excited to be here on this campus. So welcome, welcome, welcome. And without further ado, I will bring up our Executive Director, Ms. Chanel Johnson. And just a point of information, Ms. Johnson was recently married, but not to me. And that seems to be something that confuses a lot of folks. So, Ms. Yes, we're now cousins by marriage. So, Director Johnson, if you would come bring greetings. You can give her a round of applause.
Well, welcome everyone. How's everyone doing? Look at our bomb commission. Oh my goodness. We have 11 new commissioners joining, that has joined the Maryland Commission on African American History and Culture. And we're so excited by the work ahead. I will be giving my report on June and July activities, really focusing on the work of the Banneker-Douglass Museum. So let's get into it, shall we? So first, welcome commissioners. All right, give them a round of applause. So just outlining some FY 2024 goals. We have a few, one of which is to hire 6 new full-time employees. That is staff support for our education department, to fully staff our curator and exhibitions department, our marketing department, as well as to provide support staff for the African American Heritage Preservation Grant, which the annual allocation grew to $5 million, from $1 million to $5 million. Right now, we have positions posted on the Maryland State job site, so if you wanted to share that with your networks, they're good positions. Please do that.
Madam Executive Director?
Yeah.
I want to, I wanted to acknowledge our past Chair Emeritus, Dr. England Wilson, if you could stand. And I think it's important that we note that appropriation didn't just grow. It was her work and the efforts of commissioners that made that possible. So let's have that in the record.
Black girl magic in the room, y'all. Another round of applause. Secondly is to complete our strategic plan. We got to get that going. And to begin our, is that my phone? Okay, thank you. Okay. Thank you, Vice Chair. All right, to begin our capital repairs and upgrades, which is the second phase. We just completed restoration to the historic wing, but we have other restoration projects in the historic wing that we need to finish, as well as some facade work and other upgrades throughout our 11,000 square foot facility. And the BDM name change, which will be spearheaded by our new and illustrious chair, Dr. Edwin Johnson, and begin plans to upgrade our permanent exhibition, Deep Roots Rising Colors. So we got some work to do, commissioners. All right, and staff. Jan, bring it back. Okay. Oh, let me give a special shout out to our small but mighty staff that will be growing. First, our incredible administrative manager and special assistant to the commission, Mr. Herbert, LaRon Herbert. And our marketing director extraordinaire, Ms. Jan Lee. And our new Chief Financial Officer, CFO, Ms. Shelley Holland. Welcome aboard, Shelley. And so yeah, we are growing. Speaking of growing, this is a snapshot of our June and July visitation, which consists of our on-site visitation, visitors to our website, our Facebook reach and engagement, Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn. So we've reached around a little over 19,000 people within the last couple of months. Media coverage. So we have a really great dynamic exhibition up now, The Radical Voice of Blackness Speaks of Resistance and Joy, that has been getting press throughout the state, really, and the region. We had some news coverage for the new slate of commissioners and new commission leadership, and so forth. I will say, now I know this is a whole bunch of words, so just listen to my voice. We have a really, really great partnership with Radio 1, which all year long will be broadcasting our events on the Radio 1 stations. Persia Nicole, we're friends now, like we're besties. We did a really great Facebook Live as part of our Black History 365 promotion in Anne Arundel County to encourage African American heritage tourism to Annapolis and the county. Some special projects. We will be releasing the new edition of our exhibition catalog, The Radical Voices of Blackness Speaks of Resistance and Joy. Say that 3 times fast. On September 30th, our closing reception. We're really excited about that. And the website merge is still in progress, but that will be coming very soon. When I mean website merge, the commission and the museum are merging websites. So some incredible, awesome activities that we've had at the museum in June and July. We had our Juneteenth Youth Art Exhibition and Annapolis Juneteenth Parade celebration. So if you don't know, you should know that the Banneker-Douglass Museum is an after-school provider. And so we provide an after-school program at Robin Wood Community Center in partnership with the Housing Authority, Public Housing in Annapolis. And we work with a number of students all year long where they explore Black history, specifically topics of Black resistance. They explore our collections, our current exhibition, they meet artists, we take them on field trips throughout the state. As culmination, they presented their artwork at the Banneker-Douglass Museum on June 17th in recognition of Juneteenth. And First Lady Dawn Moore was the keynote speaker, and it was an awesome event. And I think it's really important to note, anybody who is doing youth programming, we really pride ourselves with, we wanted to have an elevated experience. This isn't like, oh, we're just gonna put a thumbtack on the wall featuring their artwork. We wanted it nicely framed, nicely displayed. We had a beautiful breakfast reception, and the parents, the community was just so elated by the work of the young people. As culmination to that, oh yes, there is another culmination. We will be bringing these young people to Brooklyn, New York next week, where they'll be working with the Brooklyn Arts Council to do a mural and to visit heritage sites throughout Brooklyn, New York. I mean, shout out to Brooklyn, right? They're gonna have a great time we're really excited about that. And then this year in FY 2024, we're expanding this after-school program to Annapolis High School, where they'll be focusing on civil rights activism, going on field trips, and as culmination, we might be bringing them to Cali, y'all. We'll see. So stay tuned to that. Oh, shout out to our partners who sponsored this program, which was a grant through Anne Arundel County, as well as BG&E. So leading up to the arts trip to Brooklyn, New York, we had a series of orientation workshops with the students and their families, just to kind of get their minds right on, how to be an ambassador for the museum out of state. So we're excited that they're really going to represent us well and represent themselves well. And I do believe this is going to be a transformative experience for the young people. And dare I say the adults involved. So in June, we also presented the Angel Wing Project, which was basically a showcase for the organization, and it was a musical theatrical performance featuring the work of this African-American based theater company, and it was a really great time featuring spoken word, a theater one-man show. It was really, really fantastic. Now, I don't want to steal Commissioner Green's thunder, because I know you're going to be sharing this in your report, but for me, this program really touched my heart. This was the Commission's Harriet Tubman and Women's History Award, where the honoree was Erica Bridgeford of the Baltimore Peace Fire Movement. She is a walking change agent. I mean, this is the type of woman we need to have on our walls in our permanent exhibit at the Banneker-Douglass Museum. The Baltimore Peace Fire Movement is an anti-violence movement in Baltimore City that she spearheaded along with other community partners. So we honored her with the Commission's Harriet Tubman Award, and I cried a few times at that event, as many others did, and the Commission also provided a grant to Baltimore Ceasefire, just a small donation in support of their work. So, if you don't know, you should know that the Association for African American Museums 2023 conference was in Nashville, Tennessee. Staff, myself, Jan Lee, and Sabria Hassan, our programs director, attended the conference to be recognized as a grant recipient for the African American Civil Rights Network grant. The museum was one of 14 grant recipients to receive this award. It is a new grant to do African American civil rights themed programming in FY 2024. Because 2024 is the 60th anniversary of the Civil Rights Act. So this grant is really important to the programming that we will be doing in the community. The conference, y'all know where the conference is going to be next year? Baltimore City, okay? So that's great. So this organization, I mean, you have like African American museum professionals from throughout the nation attending this conference, where we are able to connect, share effective practices, and so much more. So we're so happy that it's coming to Baltimore, where the Commission can host an event or something for them while they're here. So some museums, so I mentioned we are redoing our permanent exhibition, right? So this experience was really a great time to see what other African American museums or like-minded organizations are doing in their space. So if you have not been, when you go to Nashville, please attend the National Museum of African American Music. This museum opened in 2021. Have you been?
Yeah.
Incredible.
Oh my God, with all the hoopla and craziness going around and country music.
This was like, like it was, let me tell you, this exhibition, and you can see on the left-hand left-hand side, they have a music booth, and me and Hassan, we were battle rapping each other, and I did a really good job, but I thought I did. But it was incredible. It's a very interactive, tech-heavy exhibition, beautifully curated, and I think that when it comes to our exhibit, this is a really great inspiration on how we can be more tech and interactive within our space.
You can download music. They give you earphones and they give you a code, and you can download music if you like it, samples, and take it home with you. By the time I got back home, it was in my inbox.
Yeah.
This is a fabulous museum.
Incredible. I could have been there all day, but it's a really great, interactive, high-tech, user-friendly space. It's gorgeous. Another museum that we got a little inspiration from was the Frist Art Museum. Now, they had a really great African-American, music-based, a kind of like a survey of music through art in the United States, which is really a really great exhibit. But so that was one thing, but what really struck me even more at this museum was on the second level, they have an entire museum wing dedicated to interactive art making activities. So it's like, it really does feel kind of like a children's museum, but it's super interactive. It was packed. There was lots of families there doing at different stations, and adults as well. So that's something else to consider with our permanent exhibit. How can we make this a hands-on experience for the whole family? So speaking of incredible exhibitions, please be sure to attend our closing reception and artist talk at the Banneker-Douglass Museum on September 30th. Commissioners, you will be receiving invites to that event, where we'll be featuring the curator of the exhibitions and 3 of the artists, as well as some refreshments and just a really great time. Also, you'll have an opportunity to purchase the catalog for the exhibition, which will go out shortly. Now, the catalog is pretty late. I mean, it is, but it's because we didn't have a curator. Our curator left mid-year, so we were a little behind with that effort. Some upcoming exhibitions, we have Revisit and Reimagine, which is an exhibit featuring the archive of Afro newspaper, focusing on civil rights activities throughout the state of Maryland. And that's going to also include contemporary artists, contemporary Maryland-based artists whose work amplify certain topics throughout the exhibit. The other exhibition we'll be having be presenting at the Banneker-Douglass Museum is A Story to Tell, which features Baltimore's own Ernest Shaw. Ernest Shaw's the man. He has murals throughout the state of Maryland. He teaches at MICA, and he's just a tremendous artist. He's also being featured at the Baltimore Museum of Art Hip Hop exhibition. So he's just fantastic. Really the theme of this, and this actually kind of like took a little different twang, so to speak, after the Nashville visit, where we decided to partner with Baltimore Read Aloud to make this exhibition. Baltimore Read Aloud is a really great literacy organization, and so we partnered with them to curate books on, in the center of the gallery, books for YA books for young readers by Black authors. So we really want to make the space geared towards young people, young adults for this exhibition. So it's going to be really good. Stay tuned to that. Collections update. Whew, boy. So for those of you that don't know, you should know that the staff at the Banneker-Douglass, the staff that Harriet Tubman was holding, this statue was on loan. The statue was created by Joyce Scott, who's a MacArthur Fellow. She won the MacArthur Genius Fellowship for her work in fine arts. And this piece was on loan from the Goya Gallery, who represents her, and she was holding a veve. A veve is a staff-like, well, it's a symbol that is used in voodoo and African ritualisms, and so this kind of connected Tubman with her ancestral connections, right? It was a beautiful piece. Well, the staff was stolen, and so the commission, I mean, we worked with the museum, we worked with community partners to publicize the theft, and we eventually got the staff back because the two individuals got nervous because, you know, somebody's mama called somebody's mama, and I think that's what happened. So they mailed it back, and Janice Green and a number of commissioners, really Cheryl McLeod as well. Commissioner McLeod, who's a past commissioner and friend of the museum and commission, facilitated a restorative justice circle where the individuals were able to share their piece, but namely they were able to hear what we had to say. And Cheryl will be working with us on creating terms for restoration for the two individuals, likely some community service hours. Joyce Scott, Dr. Scott was in attendance, and she shared her view on it, and she's going to be working with the two individuals to reinstall the staff at the Banneker-Douglass Museum in the fall. The good thing is the ancestors got our back. We were able, the museum staff, we applied for the Anne Arundel Arts Grant for $50,000 to provide seed money to purchase a statue. Well, we were awarded, yay! So we got the grant. Goya Gallery is providing a match for that grant and will be working with us to fundraise the remaining funds, which is around $200,000. So we're gonna raise those funds, and this statue of Harriet Tubman will be at the museum in perpetuity. I know that's right. I was waiting, I was like, I don't know. We also loaned the Baltimore Museum of Art, Dr. Scott's a fiber piece by Dr. Scott called Mal Art as part of her an exhibit project that she'll be doing with the BMA soon. Facility upgrades, this really hasn't changed, but I will say, so we definitely need to fix our HVAC system. I would even say replace our HVAC system that we will be doing with the new capital appropriation for FY 2024. Volunteers, we've had 4 volunteers which donated their time of 18 hours at the museum. We have 1 volunteer in the building, Linda Pyatt. Where you at, Linda? Thank you for all you do, ma'am.
Thank you.
And so gallery capital repairs that will take place this fall to winter prior to the opening of our civil rights exhibition will be to restore the flooring in the hallways of Verda Welcome Hall, which is our historic wing, and some repairs to the temporary gallery, and new exhibit and electrical upgrades. This is just a snapshot of some positions that we have. This is a little, you probably can't read it, but some vacant positions that will be newly posted will be our full-time curator of collections and exhibitions position, our education coordinator position, exhibitions manager position, marketing coordinator position. We do have 3 interviews lined up for the research and preservation specialist position. Special shout out to Maryland Historical Trust staff, who will be, some of which will be serving on the panel to find a great person to fill that position. We're just excited. I mean, we're growing in the best way. So we're excited for the work ahead. We have a great staff, and we look forward to growing in our staff to further amplify our mission throughout the great state of Maryland. So thank you to the commission for all of the planning. I know y'all knew, but we went to the retreat, you know what's ahead. So I just want to thank you in advance for all your program planning, fostering community partnerships, and the coalition building that we're going to do together, and so much more. And our work couldn't be possible without supporters like yourself. You know, we are a state agency and we do receive state funding, but that private and public partnership is really critical, right? So yes, it's great that we have a really great staff and we're able to keep our building open, but what really activates our programming and initiatives, our after-school programs throughout the state, our resources that we provide artists and scholars, and the platform that we have is through donations and our grant funding. So if you wanted to support the museum and put your passion to work or further to work with us, then you can donate at bdmuseum.maryland.gov/donate. Thank you so much.
So I would like to present the chair's report, beginning with a number of site visits. We've been very busy since the June meeting. Executive Director Johnson and I have hit a number of sites, and Commissioner Frisbee, when he does the report on the African American Heritage Preservation Grant, will talk about a new strategy in which commissioners, even those commissioners who are not a part of that committee, will actually participate in site visits and bring their critiques and recommendations before we move forward. But we're very excited about that growth. And again, Chair Emeritus England Wilson, we want to salute you and thank you. And it's so important that we illuminate the fact that pot of money didn't just grow, but there was a strategic plan that she formulated, we executed, and that went from $1 million to $5 million. And we're really excited about that growth, and thank you again. So one of the visits was to the Maryland Center for History and Culture. Executive Director Johnson and I were given a tour, and we saw some of the exhibits, and we're looking forward to some future partnerships. But they also gifted us some framed pieces. And this is a framed piece of Verda Welcome, who I mentioned earlier, one of our co-founders, and I'm going to actually present my copy to the museum to be hung somewhere appropriate. I mentioned earlier about the anniversary of the March on Washington, and I want everybody to say that with me. March on Washington.
March on Washington.
Nope. March on Washington.
March on Washington.
In Annapolis.
In Annapolis.
So on August the 26th at 10 o'clock a.m., we have been planning for quite some time, and I understand there's another plan now that has recently come along, but we've been planning for quite some time to do a reenactment of the March on Washington in Annapolis. And there are a number of members of the commission and the museum staff that have been involved with that effort. I think that on yesterday, Executive Director Johnson was trying to kill me. It was so hot, and we did a walkthrough of the actual march route on yesterday in the blazing sun. Thank you for that experience. It was actually wonderful. But we invite members of the public as well as the commission to come and to be a part of acknowledging and observing this historic moment. There are a number of anniversaries that are coming in the next year or two, and we're going to be on task and make sure that none of these events take place without us doing something to acknowledge their significance. So, August 26th, everybody say it with me, August 26th?
August 26th.
10 o'clock a.m.?
10 o'clock a.m.
Navy Marine Memorial Stadium in Annapolis.
Navy Marine Memorial Stadium in Annapolis.
And that's just the pre-announcement, because we're going to hear from Ms. Lee in a little bit under the March on Washington report. But I just wanted to just kind of give you a trailer before we actually get the full motion picture. So many of you were actually a part of the retreat on this past Friday. and you all were given, a number of you were actually, I like to call it voluntold, and taken on committee chairs, and some of you have started that work. So we have a number of exciting events. And for those of you, I know there are 3 or 4 of you that were not present because you had conflicting activities, but you have homework. You are to generate your partners list, and if you haven't gotten that assignment, we'll tell you a little bit about that. And then we're also working on a letter to actually inform your colleagues and relevant organizations, political officials in your region, so that they are aware of who you are and what we do. And in the event we need to disseminate information quickly, you all are already tapped into those movers and shakers within your region. So hopefully everyone has gotten started on that. And Commissioner Morrison, I've received your emails, and I thank you for taking the leadership. There are, I believe, 6 commissioners in Baltimore City. 7. So I'm going to be looking, and since you already started with that, I'm a voluntold you to take a leadership role in that, to divide up the city of Baltimore as we start collecting those partners in Baltimore City. So we're really excited about that. Executive Director Johnson mentioned briefly, and I don't know how I missed this on Friday, but one of the things that I want to do before I step down in June of 2024 is to change the name of the Banneker-Douglass Museum to the Banneker-Douglass-Tubman Museum. And I spoke briefly with Commissioner Pinkston, and we're getting ready to do some voluntoldism over there, and I'm going to work with her to take the lead on that effort. And then the last thing that I want to speak on is our book donation drive. As many of you know, there has been a whole lot of interesting things taking place in the state of Florida, which we don't believe is going to stop in the state of Florida. It's going to eventually make its way this way, where they're questioning the legitimacy of African American studies, African American history. We're hearing notions and arguments that slavery actually was a career building experience. When in fact, if you know just a little bit about how slave traders work, they came to understand that there were certain regions of Africa and certain tribes and certain peoples that actually had specific skills in agriculture and metallurgy and a number of things. And a lot of the slave traders strategically and specifically kidnapped Africans from certain regions because they knew that they would come with those same skills. So it's actually the reverse of what's being offered. But, and I could go on and on, this kind of feels like a pulpit, but I'm not going to preach. But the point that I want to make is that this commission is not going to idly sit by when there are games afoot. So one of our responses to what's going on in Florida is that we're going to organize a book donation drive. We are going to begin collecting books on African American history and culture for K through 12. And actually, Commissioner Wilson, looking at your resume, I think that you're the perfect person, but I'm not going to put you on the spot. So don't feel like you're on the spot right now, even though there's a camera going and everything. But we're going to have a sidebar after this meeting. But when I was looking at all of the commissioners' resumes and CVs, I was like, she can do this. But what we'll be looking to do, and that's why that community partner list is so important, because when we finally come up with that list, you all are going to reach out and get those same folks to actually reach out to their contacts, and we hope to have a great inventory of brand new. We don't want people cleaning out their attics or their basement and giving us anything that's molded or waterlogged, that's been blocked or something in the garage, but we want brand new books so that children across the great state of Maryland will have the opportunity to study and learn and be enriched and edified and educated about the African American experience. So that's something that I'm very, very, very excited about, and I hope you all will be able to catch that enthusiasm. But overall, the meat and potatoes of my report is that we got a lot of work to do. There are a lot of anniversaries coming up in this next season, and there is a lot that we have to combat in terms of what's going on in a lot of the political arenas here and across the nation. So thank you for that. Now I'm going to call up Commissioner Turner to present the finance report.
I have been voluntold that I am now the chair of the finance committee, so this is my first meeting giving a report. I'm not sure what in my resume would have given me that assignment other than 23 years as a financial advisor, but for fiscal year 23, the budget appropriated for the commission was $924,346. Our actual usage was $804,966. We were about 12.9% under budget. Much of that is accounted for by we had not hired all the salaried positions that we received. Our new CFO had just came on board 5/31 of 23. Also in the fiscal year of 23, the Banneker-Douglass Museum received a $75,000 capital grant from the Department of General Services, and about $42,000 of that balance is still remaining. For fiscal year 24, the commission has been appropriated $1.5 million, and that is for 3 state positions and 2 contractual positions that need to be filled, which Executive Director Johnson spoke about earlier in her report. The budget also includes $9,000 in special funds, and the Banneker-Douglass Museum was appropriated $3 million in a capital grant from the Department of General Services to be for capital improvements of the museum.
Thank you, sir. Are there any questions or concerns about the finance report? We'll accept that report, Mr. Herbert. So next, everybody, once again, August 26th, 10 o'clock.
August 26th, 10 o'clock.
I know, y'all aren't, are y'all still with me? August the 26th at 10 o'clock. All right. I'm going to welcome Ms. Jan Lee, the Director of Marketing and Communications.
Good afternoon, everyone. We'll be speaking about the March on Washington, the Maryland commemoration in Annapolis and Anne Arundel County. That's been mentioned so far in this meeting. I do invite you all to come out and participate in what will be a very powerful event as we channel the ancestors and the elders in reinvigorating, reenacting the charge of the work that still needs to be done, as Chair just spoke about as well. There will be 2 full days of events, so that's Saturday, August the 26th, and Sunday, August the 27th. I did hand out the flyers so that you can see that wonderful schedule of events. Just to also point out, the Maryland Commission on African American History and Culture and the Banneker-Douglass Museum are partners on this event with the Caucus of African American Leaders, as well as with the North Arundel chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated and the United Black Clergy. And so again, to emphasize, this is the Maryland commemoration. We do know that there are other events. There's also going to be events in Washington, D.C., but this is the Maryland commemoration. In particular, one thing that will be featured are people that participated in the original march that were from Annapolis. There was a bus of people from Annapolis that went to participate in that original march. And so we're just bringing that to our area so that we can really celebrate our contribution to that event and to the movement. So please do visit the website. The QR code is on the flyer, and we would highly encourage you to register. We're expecting thousands of people to come out for the March reenactment, which is the afternoon of Saturday, which is followed by a formal program, just as what happened in 1963. There'll be a tribute to women freedom fighters, youth presenters, and a full list of speakers, including the president of Morgan State University. So we're very excited about that. There will be a mural that will be created, a civil rights commemorative mural at the Banneker-Douglass Museum. So the march will actually go past the Banneker-Douglass Museum, and that's being led by artist and muralist Nikki Brooks. So very excited about that. And then Sunday is an activation Sunday where we're asking Maryland worship leaders and pastors to dedicate their morning service to the March on Washington. And then we have at 1 o'clock a health resource fair with food vendors, and you can see artwork from our youth participants. And then at 3 o'clock is the culminating worship service and vigil. Very powerful, impactful speakers, again, to reinvigorate and recharge us for the work that has to be done. And, still needs to be done in 2023 and beyond. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Lee. August 26th, 10 o'clock a.m. Commissioners, we're expecting you there. Y'all, a little bit of excitement, enthusiasm? Y'all just kind of, okay. We're expecting you there.
Absolutely.
All right. Next, we will have Commissioner Tajani, who will speak and give us what to expect for the upcoming annual symposium. You're fine. Just need to be in the microphone.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Yeah, mine is to report that we will continue to collaborate with Morgan State University College of Liberal Arts and Behavioral Sciences on the annual Quarles Lecture and the conference. This year is going to take place in October 26th and 27th. And then the venue is the College of Liberal Arts on the other side of campus. There will be a pre-conference on September 1st, and the theme of this year's conference is Lynching Resistance and the Pursuit of Peace. That is all I have. Thank you.
That is sufficient. Thank you. Any questions?
Can we just hear a little bit more about the Quarles lecture taking place over the course of 2 days, but it's one lecture or a series?
They're actually, part one is designed for youth. I believe there is a partnership with a nearby high school or middle school. So the 26th, I believe, is for youth, and the 27th is for adults, educators, and community organization association members. But there will be more details to follow. Anyone else? All right. I preempted the next item on the reports, which is the book donation drive. And again, I'm hoping, I know that Commissioner Money has already had some conversation because there's an effort here in the School of Education, and I'm hoping that the faculty member will be able to join us. And I'm also hoping that you will either join or head that committee, Commissioner Wilson. But again, the goal is to begin collecting brand new books on the African-American experience, African-American studies, that will eventually, and the committee will figure out the details in terms of what is the appropriate and most efficient means of disseminating those books throughout the state of Maryland. All right, any questions about that? Are there any commissioners who thought about it at the retreat, but then you slept on it and you said, you know what? This project speaks to me. Dr. Gill, this Commissioner Gill, that project speaks to you?
I have a question.
Oh,
the
okay.
date of brand new?
I'm sorry?
what is the date of brand new? From 2000, from?
We actually want you, when Barnes and Nobles or whatever bookstore you frequent starts having sales for back to school, August, September, to go out and get something or encourage someone to go out and purchase things. What we don't want is folks cleaning out their attics and garages and donating books that they don't want. We want folks to gift things that they would want someone to give them.
Well, there's several books that are relevant that were done in the last several years. For example, David Miller has done about 2 or 3 children's books.
We can't get any brand new copies of those?
Well, they can be brand new.
All right, that's what we're looking for. Brand new.
Okay.
Brand new. Something that you would want to receive, something that you would want your children, your niece, your nephew, your grandchildren to receive. All right. Next report will be from Commissioner Frisbee regarding the African American Heritage Preservation Grant.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As many of you know, the African American Heritage Preservation Grant program has been a jewel in the, a bright jewel in the crown of the Commission. It has now become a shining jewel in the crown of the Commission. The annual grant amount has increased in total from $1 million a year to $5 million a year. And to give you an example, last year was the largest number of grant applications we've had, probably 45. We had very solid applications which would have amounted to $4 million, and obviously we couldn't do it. So every year we have faced the problem of the fact that there are many more good applications that we could possibly fund. And thanks to the governor and the Speaker of the House and the President of the Senate, that amount has now risen from $1 million to $5 million. As a commission, we've been active already. I think about a week or so ago, the executive director and I, along with the Maryland Heritage Trust, held a community meeting in Howard County to discuss the program, and I think several of the commissioners were here. The good news is that we now have 108 applications. That's obviously more than twice what the number we've had before. In addition, the even better news is we have now a committee of 9 commissioners who will be at least making the preliminary cut and the recommendations to the commission. The way the process works is that MHT is currently reviewing the applications for completeness. We expect to get the completed applications probably by the end of the month. Our committee will then, we have taken a new approach, particularly given the number and the amount of money we now have. We plan to divide the state among the 9 commissioners, and each commissioner will be responsible for at least visiting a certain number of sites. And to the extent there's sites that we can't get to because of the locations of the commissioners, we are going to call on our other commissioners to at least visit that site, so someone on the commission will have visited that site. The next step is that the committee will review the applications, and we can our grants can range from $10,000 to $250,000. And then in October, we will make our recommendations to the commission as to the awards of the grant. So we are moving. It's going to be a lot more work, and I want to thank all my commissioners in advance for the hard work that you're going to do. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Frisbee. We are really excited about the opportunity, and we really can't say enough about the African American Heritage Preservation Grant and the work. Let me see the hands of the commissioners that are part of that committee. So what excites me, that's one of the first committees that I served on. What excites me about that is that that is a contribution that is going to live long past your tenure and really long past our experience here on the planet. So to know that you had a part in securing that a brick and mortar, a physical structure that will be with us is a significant contribution. So I really like to call that program the crown jewel of the commission, and we're really excited about the work that you all will be doing. So I'm going to call up Executive Director Johnson to introduce our first guest speaker for today.
Thank you, Chair. So I wanted to bring up, don't worry, Elizabeth, we gonna work this part out. All right. So Maryland Historical Trust has been a partner of the museum and co-administering the African American Heritage Preservation Grant, and Director Elizabeth Hughes, since her tenure as Director at Maryland Historical Trust since 2017-ish, really has hit the ground running and collaborated with our commission on the preservation plan, racial equity, study groups, the African American Cemetery Report, and a number of other projects. And she will be sharing 2 initiatives with the commission that we are invested in. So without further ado, Ms. Elizabeth Hughes.
Well, thank you all. Thank you very much for having us today to present on this issue. It's a sensitive issue. Sorry, I can't use the mic. As the director said, my name's Elizabeth Hughes. I'm the director of the Maryland Historical Trust, and I serve as Maryland State Historic Preservation Officer. We're so pleased that you were able to make time for us on your agenda today to talk about this very sensitive issue. I will tell you what is I think particularly interesting about what we're going to be presenting today is that, to our knowledge, no other state is addressing human remains in this way, particularly human remains of African or African American descent that are in their collections. You may be familiar with efforts to repatriate Native American human remains that is federally mandated, and that's a process that any museum institution that holds remains goes through. But to our knowledge, addressing African American or African remains are not dealt with in this way. So I have here with me today other guests who are going to be speaking. We're going to be trading off here. And I want to introduce the folks who are with me today. Dr. Patricia Sanford, who's the director of the Maryland Archaeology Conservation Laboratory, which is where these remains that we're going to be discussing are currently cared for. Adam Snyder, who's the principal counsel of the Maryland Historical Trust and the Maryland Department of Planning, and Dr. Zachary Singer, who is the state terrestrial archaeologist. And they all have different expertise that they will be bringing to bear here in this discussion. So the Maryland Historical Trust, I believe you all might have received a memo that sort of has background information before this presentation, so you understand the context in which we're having this discussion. But the Maryland Historical Trust currently has human remains from 73 individuals that are in its possession at the Maryland Archaeology Conservation Laboratory. The McLeod, as we call it, is located in Calvert County, Maryland. It's open to the public. It's available for tours. If you ever have an interest, we'd love to host you there. Of the remains that are in our possession currently, 12 sets are determined to be of African or possible African descent. So the presentation that we're going to share with you today is going to cover 4 points. We're going to address the current condition of the remains that we are caring for presently, how ethnicity of human remains is determined, the provenance of the remains in our care, and then opportunities to return these remains to the care of culturally affiliated communities, as stipulated by the state of Maryland regulations. So this process will be controlled by Maryland regulatory rules. So I'm going to hand the mic over to Dr. Sanford, who's going to address what we have at the McLeod and how they are cared for presently, and then we will hear from Dr. Singer.
Thank you for this opportunity. All right, the McLeod, Maryland Archaeological Conservation Lab, is a mouthful, so McLeod is much faster. We're located on the grounds of Jefferson Patterson Park and Museum, like Elizabeth said, down in Calvert County. And that is also the location of a Morgan State off-campus facility, Pearl, the Patuxent Environmental and Aquatic Research Laboratory. So we're very happy and lucky to have them there with us. Now, the McLab opened in 1998. We are the official state curation facility for archaeological artifacts from all over the state of Maryland. And we have about 10 million artifacts in the building that we care for and make available for study. The human remains that are in the McLab came to us in 1998 when our facility opened. Most of those sets of human remains were recovered through accidental discovery, through construction work or through erosion, with bones eroding out and then being salvaged to protect them from going into the water. Currently, we really discourage the recovery of human remains. We try to preserve human remains or burials when they are found in place and not remove those remains from the ground. But most of these remains that came into the lab when we opened in 1998 were from discoveries made between the 1960s and the 1990s. Now, we treat these human remains in a very respectful way. We keep them in a separate area deemed the appropriate place of repose in our lab. They are not available to public view. We do not let the public see these remains or handle these remains. They are kept above ground in climate-controlled conditions, conducive to long-term preservation. We do not intermingle these sets of remains. So in other words, if 5 individuals were found at one place or location, those are kept separate, and then the individuals are kept separately from one another. And again, we don't make them available to members of the public except as sometimes studies have been done by scholars, but there's a long process that goes with getting the permission to do analysis of human remains. Dr. Singer is going to come up now and explain how determinations of ancestry on sets of human remains are made.
Thanks again for having us. So the remains in the McLeod that have been determined to be of African descent or African American have mostly been through analysis by specialist forensic anthropologists. And so the way that these determinations have been by examination of the physical skeletal material. And so here you can see the certain markers of ethnic diversity that were used by these trained forensic anthropologists to identify the likely ethnic background of archaeologically recovered human remains. And so there are different traits. This particularly focuses on the skulls and mandibles and teeth, but ways that these researchers can determine the ethnic origin. I'm not going to go into them in detail, but trusting that these, again, specially trained forensic anthropologists have studied these remains to make these determinations. And so, while it's not 100% accurate, these forensic anthropologists can be relatively accurate. So based on recent studies, the accuracy is somewhere between 70 and 90% for classifying individuals of African descent and differentiating them from those of European descent. So that's how, when we're discussing these remains, which will be coming up, the analysis has been determined by specialized experts. So I think Tricia is now back for discussing the individual sites.
I drank all my milk when I was a kid, and I still neglected to grow. So always the shortest person in the room. So there are 5 specific locations where human remains of African descent or possible African descent have been found that are under the care of the Maryland Historical Trust. One in Anne Arundel County at Deep Creek site. These numbers that you see, 18AN 341, this is a special code that archaeologists across the United States use to identify their sites. And if anybody is interested after the meeting, I'll be happy to tell you, how that's what that all means. One in Calvert County, Gott Cemetery. One in Charles County, Chapel Point. One in Queen Anne's County, Bennett's Point, and one in Wicomico County, Twin Oaks. I'm going to talk about each of these sites in particular. All right, this is a map showing the location of the Deep Creek site on Deep Creek, pretty close near Annapolis, I think, or in Annapolis. The photo that you see is a current, will always be a current Google Earth shot of what the site looks like today. There were 6 individuals that were discovered at the Deep Creek site. They appeared to be part of a larger cemetery. There were 2 adult females, 2 teenage males, and 2 teenage females. They were discovered during a construction project in 1974, probably when this house was being built. There were a few native sandstone markers, and a couple of those markers had some scratchings on them. One had a date that was legible, 1764. We believe that these individuals were put in the ground in either the 18th or the 19th century. We have also done summary chains of titles for these properties and summarized them here for the time period that we feel is appropriate for the internment of these individuals. And it looks like Nicholas McCubbin owned the property between 1754 and 1794, and then after that, Governor John Hoskins Stone. So it is possible that these people were enslaved individuals working on this property in the 18th and 19th centuries. In Calvert County, the Gott Cemetery. And here, when this house was being constructed, or after the house was constructed, they put a swimming pool in. And when they were excavating for the swimming pool, they found the remains of one adult female, age 45 to 59 years old. It was a set of incomplete remains, and then also partial remains of a second individual, an adult male of indeterminate ancestry. So, an archaeologist was called to the site when these bones were discovered in 1983 during the swimming pool construction, and were removed and brought to be under the care of the state. It looks like this land was a large tobacco farm during the 18th and 19th centuries, and it looks like it's likely that the folks that were discovered during the swimming pool construction may have been workers there on this property. Now, when we originally prepared the memo for the commission in April, we thought that we had remains of African ancestry from 6 different locations. The Patuxent Point site was a property that was archaeologically excavated by Dr. Julie King in advance of the Asbury Retirement Community going in. This is down near Solomon's Island. And in the course of that excavation of a domestic home site, they discovered a cemetery that had 19 individuals in it. And the physical anthropologists from the Smithsonian looked at these human remains, and they said they're all of European descent except one, which may possibly be of African ancestry. And two physical anthropologists at the Smithsonian looked at this individual, and they both disagreed. One said this individual looks like it's of European descent, and the other said, no, I feel like it looks more like it's of African ancestry. And so the report that we had, that we used to prepare the memo in April, showed this uncertainty about this individual. In 2009, Dr. Julie King and Dr. Michael Blakey had DNA analysis conducted on this individual that was in question. And after we sent the report off in April, we actually looked, got our hands on a copy of that DNA report, and it turns out that that person is decisively, definitively European ancestry. But because we had put that 6 sites in, we wanted to be able to explain why that site was no longer in this list.
So I will skip over this slide.
All right, there's a site in Charles County, Chapel Point. And there are 2 individuals of African ancestry that were recovered in 1987 when they were discovered to be eroding out of the bank into the river. And some archaeologists from the Maryland Historical Trust went and salvaged those remains and brought them back to be under the care of the Maryland Historical Trust. 2 years prior to that, another individual who had been eroding out was removed by a professional historian, and those remains also found their way to the Maryland Historical Trust. We believe that these remains were interred around 1820 or so. The current property, I know that our little sign has the label on the map shows it in the woods, but the actual remains were eroding out from along the shore. It turns out that this property was in the hands of the Catholic Church. It was founded in 1861, St. Ignatius Parish, and it's one of the oldest Catholic parishes in continuous service in the United States. And the Catholic churchyard that was in use at this waterside location until around 1820, and then they moved the cemetery in the 1860s to be closer to the church, which you can see down at the bottom that's just off the screen in this photograph. So it looks like these individuals were missed when they moved that cemetery right after the Civil War. And then we have 2 sets of human remains over on the eastern shore, one in Queen Anne's County, the Bennett's Point site. And this one is really interesting to me. It was a white-owned farmstead. Again, today it is a residential community where the site was located. An archaeologist excavated on this site for several years in the late 1960s and early 1970s. And one of the things that he excavated was what's called a midden or a trash area. Think about today, we're pretty fortunate the garbage truck comes and gets our garbage a couple times a week. In the 18th century, that didn't happen. People took their garbage and they put it off on a separate part of their property. And archaeologists love to dig these, right? Because they're full of stuff, right? And helps us learn about people from the past. So when this archaeologist was digging in this midden area, he found traces of a place. The soil was a different color in about a 30-inch diameter area where somebody had dug a hole through the trash pit, through the trash area, and had placed a set of, or sets of bones from 2 individuals. The notes describe this as a bone bundle. So I think what happened was 2 graves were disturbed. and they realized that they had disturbed a grave, and this was in the 1700s when this disturbance took place, and they reburied these bones after they had disturbed the graves over in this area that had formerly been used for depositing trash. So there were two individuals. There was an adult male and another individual aged 15 to 19, sex and age indeterminate at that site.
Question?
Yes, sir.
Are you saying that the bones were discovered, the bones were moved at the same time as the site was a trash pile? Or was they were moved there after the site was no longer used for trash?
So it looks like the area was not being used for the deposition of trash at the time that the reburial of these remains was done. Okay. And then we have a site in Wicomico County, Twin Oaks. And this property was in the Shockley family for about 80 years, from the 1840s until 2022, when it was turned over to the Maryland Department of Natural Resources. You can see that the site is heavily wooded. The human remains there were discovered when a bulldozer was brought in see which date it was. I think it was in the 1980s or 90s, to get some fill dirt, and a grave was disturbed. There was an adult female, and then partial remains of another individual of indeterminate ancestry were discovered at that time. An archaeologist from the Eastern Shore was called to the site to help recover these remains, and they then came into the care of the Maryland Historical Trust. So these are the human remains of African or possible African ancestry that we have at the Maryland Archaeological Conservation Lab. And I'll be happy to answer any questions after, or yes. Yes, sir?
Are all construction companies aware of the Maryland Historical Trust? And what's the process once remains are discovered?
Is that something you can answer, Elizabeth? Or I'm sure all construction companies are not aware of us, and on private land, I think things are, I'm going to let her handle it.
Yeah, so maybe our council can speak to Maryland burial law. I would say that the Maryland Historical Trust is not involved in construction permitting activities unless state or federal funds are involved. So if it's a private development project, we would not be involved to begin with, but if human remains were discovered in the process of any kind of construction project, my understanding of state burial law is that they must contact the state's attorney office to determine what the next step would be, either to leave them in place or to rebury them, that sort of thing.
Do they contact you directly or someone at the state of Maryland?
We would only be contacted if the state's attorney's office had concerns that they may be, historic remains. Part of the question, of course, whenever human remains are identified is whether it was a crime. But if they're historic remains, then that would not be the case.
You can contact the Office on Cemetery Oversight here in Baltimore, Maryland. I work closely with them, and then they'll direct you to contact the state's attorney's office, and they'll tell you the procedures to go through if you find human remains.
All right, Adam Schneider's going to come up.
I'm Adam Snyder from the Maryland Attorney General's Office, and as the lawyer, I don't get to talk about interesting things like archaeology and forensic studies. I get to talk about the more dry subject of the law and the regulations that govern this process, but it's an important process because it is the way, I subsisted as a kid on basically candy. So the law and the regulations set out the process for getting these remains out of the McLeod under MHT's control and into a more appropriate place of repose among either family members or people who have a cultural connection to the remains. And there are essentially three options that I want to talk about. The first is someone who can establish that they are a linear descendant of the remains has, by statute, priority. So if you can establish that you are a lineal descendant of the person whose remains we've found, then you get the custody of the remains, and you can decide for yourself what is the most appropriate way to deal with those remains. Now, there's a process for establishing that you are a lineal descendant. You make a request to MHT. You provide documentation that establishes that you are a lineal descendant. And if you can make that demonstration, then the remains are released to your custody. Now, option 2 is if you're not a linear descendant, but you can establish that you have a cultural affiliation with the person whose remains we have. And you can do that in a variety of different ways. That can be established with genealogical information. It can be established with historical information, church records, just any kind of information that ties your group or you as an individual with either the person or maybe even the area where the person's remains were found. Now this is option 2 because you're not a linear descendant. You have cultural affiliation, and by statute, linear descendant comes first. But if there are no linear descendants, or if there are linear descendants but they do not object, they don't want to take the remains themselves, then a culturally affiliated group, through a process laid out in statute and regulations, can submit a request to MHT along with the documentation establishing their cultural affiliation. And if all works out, then the remains are released to their custody for that culturally affiliated group to handle the remains as they see fit. Now, both option 1 and 2 have a process associated with it. I talked about people can make requests, whether it's a linear descendant or a culturally affiliated group. That petition, that request, gets circulated among other people who have expressed an interest in the remains, either as a linear descendant or as someone with, cultural affiliation with the remains. Those requests are also submitted to you, this commission, for your review and comment. And so these requests get vetted through all of the different interested parties, the commission included, and then all of that information comes to MHT to make a decision as to what is the appropriate place for those remains to be repatriated to. The third option, and you've already heard the phrase appropriate place of repose, is an option that's kind of always available. And you saw the slide earlier that defined appropriate place of repose, and it said that the remains can be stored either above ground or below ground. So one option here is the historic trust working with an individual or entity that has some connection with the remains, but maybe not a lineal descendant, maybe not culturally affiliated, but has some connection. The historical trust can arrange to essentially rebury the remains on property that it has some control over. MHT doesn't have to own the property. It can be state-owned property, it can be locally owned, but it can also be privately owned, so long as MHT maintains legal control and custody of the remains, they can be reburied in the ground. And the reason why MHT has to maintain custody and control of the remains is because the appropriate place of repose way of handling remains is almost by definition a temporary thing. It's, you keep them there so that they can be in the, keep them in an appropriate, respectful setting, but you have access to them just in case a lineal descendant emerges, or someone with cultural affiliation can establish later on that, hey, I want to take custody of those remains. MHT needs to be able to get at those remains, find them again, and exhume them, and give them to the custody of the lineal descendant. I think that's really all I have about the legal aspects. Do we have any closing things, or just more questions here?
I have a question. How does one go about finding more information about those remains in order to establish that you're a lineal descendant, or that you are an appropriate cultural community? I'm particularly interested in the remains buried at St. Ignatius in Charles County. There are not a whole lot of black Catholics, and well, yes, there are actually, but my father's family descendants, some were enslaved. He's from Charles County, well, he's of course deceased, Charles County, and it would seem appropriate that some of their remains might be buried in a Catholic church cemetery.
So I think this does take us to the next slide, which is, this is the first time this has been done.
I'll see you after.
So, that's right.
Before we go to the next slide, I have a question with regard to the last slide. With regard to situation 2, is there anything in the pipeline that the commission should know about that may come before us to make a decision, to give input?
Well, so, I mean, we presented to you today so that you understand where we are with the remains that are in our custody and control. And it is our understanding that there is a shared interest in returning these remains to the earth. That isn't something that must happen. We're happy to continue to care for them as they are. But I think that there are other options to care for these remains in a respectful way that returns them to locations where they were excavated from. And so in order to determine how we go about this process, what we are interested in is working collaboratively with the commission, with perhaps a working group that you appoint, to come up with what is the plan, what is appropriate, what is your desire, how do we proceed? Because there isn't a model for this, there isn't a protocol for this. This is the first time, to our knowledge at this point, that this sort of thing has been done. So we'd like to work hand in hand with you in terms of determining now what, what do we do, what is appropriate? And perhaps it is appropriate to return some of the remains from Charles County to the cemetery where they were excavated from, or maybe there's a different approach. I think we talked a little bit about the difficulty, the real challenge in identifying lineal descendants, because we have very little information except for the remains themselves. Because these remains are on the whole so very old, and we don't have much in the way of genealogical information. We just have the material itself. That will be very challenging. But I think in committee we can talk about what are the options, and there may be different options for each of the remains from each of the locations. And so having representation on that working group from each of the various counties perhaps, or depending how you decide to proceed, is what we would suggest.
This is a point of information. For those of you who attended the retreat on Friday, remember that we established a Human Remains Cemetery Research and Preservation Committee, Commissioners Green and Thompson. And that is the work that you all will be doing in terms of how we will move forward. So a lot of these questions can be tabled until that time.
Elizabeth, just
Yes.
one question. Were you able to extract the DNA from that, from any remains?
Now, Tricia, do you want to talk a little bit about the DNA that's been done to date? Because no, I don't believe DNA has been done on all of the remains, and that might be something for the working group to decide. This is, something we want to do. Where do we find money to do that, and so forth. But
So DNA has not been done on analysis, has not been done on any of these remains except 2 individuals from that Patuxent Point site that, I'm sorry, I'll need to have my backs to you all. From that Patuxent Point site that had the cemetery of 19 people, DNA was taken from a molar of the individual that was believed to possibly be of African descent, and another that was shown or believed to be of European descent as a control. And so DNA analysis has only been done on 2 individuals that I know of in our collections at this point, and I believe none of the individuals that were discussed today.
So at each site, I know each site, from Bennett's Point on the Eastern Shore, I know the family that's in the area. I've heard some oral histories, been there. Calvert County and Charles County. So we will be working together. I do know of some additional information that can be helped throughout the community, so we can put these people in their final resting places. So the families are still in the area, especially in Bennett's Point, Charles County, Wicomico.
And when we were doing the chain of titles to try to figure out if, who some of these people might be, I know that the Shockley family is a white family that owned this land, but there are black Shockleys in that area as well. And so it is possible, that we could approach some of the black Shockleys and if they would, we could do comparative DNA analysis.
I think Calvert County is should be around 12 people down at Calvert County, but they slipped off into the water. You hear oral histories and things like that, so I just...
So if there are any other, because we don't want to belabor this too long, but if there are any other commissioners that are interested in joining this committee, you need to see Commissioner Green and Thompson.
Thank you all very much. Yes.
You're located in Calvert County?
We're in Calvert County. It's at St. Leonard.
Did you say that you're open for tours?
Yes, sir, for about another month. We're about to start a multi-million-dollar expansion project, and so we might not be allowed to have the public in our building once construction starts sometime this fall. So if you all want to have a tour, arrange a tour, we can make that happen.
What is there to tour?
The Maryland Archaeological Conservation Lab is a 38,000 square foot facility where we've got 10 million artifacts from all over Maryland. We've got a large archaeological conservation lab where we stabilize and treat archaeological artifacts from Maryland and all over the mid-Atlantic. So it's quite an impressive facility. Maryland does a nice job with its archaeological past.
So, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Round of applause. Switching over to Elizabeth will be giving one more presentation on our preservation project, and we have one question from Dr. Amin.
Yes, thank you. Just one last question. So throughout your presentation, you referred to non-native remains, as in non-Native American, presumably. But has there been some repatriation model related to their remains and a protocol in place that we can draw from, or any collaboration that is happening with sovereign Native American territories that can work with us in advising this process?
So back in, I would say the late 2009, 10-ish, I'm not sure the dates. The archaeologist from Maryland worked with members, Native peoples appointed by the Maryland Commission on Indian Affairs to create a working group, much like we are suggesting here, to determine what would happen to Native human remains that we had under our care at the Maryland Archaeological Conservation Lab. And they met regularly for a couple of years, and they came up with, because there were no, when we started these conversations, there were no state or federally recognized tribes in Maryland that we could legally turn these human remains over to. The working group came up with a plan that was very similar, that was like option 3 that Adam talked about. And all of the remains except those of the Piscataway, who became a state recognized tribe right towards the end of this working group process. But all of the Native human remains were divided into 4 groups based on where they were recovered in the state of Maryland. And we worked to reinter those remains on state parks in the regions that the remains had come from originally. And they are, there's a lot of detail that I could tell you, but they are all back in the ground with the exception of the Piscataway remains, and they are still, like Adam said, under state ownership in case we do end up with, say, another group gets state recognition and they would like to take control of those remains, then we are able to exhume them and give them to that tribe. So, thank you.
And one last question. Can you make the presentation available for the commission?
Yes.
Great, well thank you. I will try to move briefly through this, or quickly through this presentation. This is on the State Historic Preservation Plan. Nell Zeal of our office, who handles the Historic Preservation Plan update, would have been here. She's on leave this week. So as we've discussed, the Maryland Historical Trust is Maryland State Historic Preservation Office. We have a governing board, Board of Trustees. We are embedded within the Maryland Department of Planning. And as the State Historic Preservation Office, we have certain responsibilities and duties that are delegated to us by the federal government. The National Park Service is our sort of parent federal agency. And one of the requirements of the National Park Service is that we create a state historic preservation plan on a regular basis. The State Historic Preservation Plan really is to identify what are the goals and objectives for historic preservation activities statewide, not just for the Maryland Historical Trust. The plan that comes out isn't really just a work plan for us, but it's for all of our partners working in the field. And I know that the Commission has many goals that go beyond historic preservation, but certainly a lot of work that you do has such a positive impact on African American historical and cultural resources that we wanted to present today on the State Historic Preservation Planning process. Our plan is expiring at the end of this year. In the past, this plan was updated every 5 years or so. We are now going to be on an 8-year cycle with a 4-year update so that it will align with the gubernatorial election cycle. It really helps us to be more responsive to changes in administration goals and priorities. We kicked off the planning process really in January with internal planning meetings. We have been having, over the course of the summer, public outreach meetings. They began in late spring, in May. There have been in-person meetings as well as an online survey and that sort of thing. We did host with the Commission some outreach activities along with other partners that you can see here. We had a very successful series of public meetings, and I believe Director Johnson, you were participating in those, and you really helped us with the outreach to have people in person. I don't know about you, but one of the things we're finding since COVID is it's increasingly difficult to get people in person out to events. At the same time that we're doing this planning effort, we're seeing a lot of our sister state agencies and other agencies are undertaking planning efforts too, so there can be some degree of planning fatigue when you're doing all this outreach and the survey work. The focus groups that we've had so far are identified here. There have been 2 that we've executed with the commission that are now completed. One was in Hagerstown, so thank you very much, Commissioner Turner, for hosting us in Hagerstown, as well as one in Columbia, Maryland. The way the plan will develop is not only are we looking at statewide preservation issues, but we're also trying to look at regional trends. I think when we did the plan last time, we saw there were real differences in terms of the needs and priorities of communities depending on where they are geographically in the state. You may have one area that's really being pressured by development. There's high development that's leading to a lot of threats of demolition and property being taken over by development interests, whereas in other areas you're really seeing a lot of disinvestment. Similarly, we see with climate change and sea level rise impacts on coastal areas that are threatened in a much different way than you have with flash flooding and those sorts of climate impacts. Public meetings that have been completed, we're really just about wrapping up these public meetings now. I would encourage folks to continue to share the online survey that we have with communities to the extent that, that you might have networks that we have not reached thus far. We have conducted targeted surveys to the archaeology community, to students, and to museum and cultural institutions, and there is a general survey online. What we've been hearing so far is a real desire for preservation and documentation support beyond capital grants. It's wonderful the African American Heritage Preservation Grant Program, now funded at $5 million a year, can support capital projects. Huge unmet need for many, many years among those resources. But we know that the program at this point in time can't also support non-capital activities, things like oral history collection, educational programs, interpretation. That's true with our Capital Historic Preservation Grant Program as well. The only program we have right now that can do those non-capital activities is the Maryland Heritage Areas Grant Program, but not all of the state is in a heritage area, so there are limitations there. So we're really hearing from the field this need for activities that are research and survey oriented. Also access to programs. When you're working with partners who do not have a lot of capacity, I'm sure you've all seen this as you're reviewing grant applications, there really needs to be that support for operational development and capacity building at local or small organizations, nonprofit organizations in particular. Also need for networking and training, volunteer support. This particularly, although all of the partners that we heard from, all of the input we're getting is the need for capacity building, but particularly among the African American organizations that we heard from and in those focus groups, the need for networking. So I think the work that the Commission is doing is going to be so important in terms of supporting partners in that way. So the plan is in process now, and we present to you today just to make sure that we're touching folks who are going to have input to provide, so that when the final plan is developed, which our hope is that towards the end of this year, we will have in the fall a draft plan that will synthesize all of the information and have goals and objectives identified and action items. It will then be made available for public comment. It will be up for a 30-day public comment period, at which point we can always, as we get comment, tweak the action items, the goals, and so forth in that plan, so it is most responsive to the needs of the citizens of Maryland. So we'll look forward to sharing with you when we have a draft for your review, and we look forward to any of your constructive comments and how to make this plan something that really does support all of our efforts when it comes to historic preservation in Maryland. So, thank you very much.
we have one final guest speaker who is not a stranger to us. Commissioner, can I say Commissioner Emeritus? Is that appropriate?
Yes.
Come on out.
I like that.
Cheryl McLeod, ladies and gentlemen.
I am trying to now use some technology for a change.
Okay.
My friends know I'm old school and proud of it, SKOOL. So even to see me with this is very change agent for me. I'm also going to have some help today. I am here, first of all, I want to thank the commission. I've served on the commission actually 2 terms plus a few more, and I've been so blessed with having the opportunity to work with such awesome people. And I see familiar faces, and then I see some new ones. So for the new ones, welcome. You're going to hopefully find this as rewarding as I have. And for the familiar faces, I feel like I'm home in some sense. So it's great to see those familiar faces today. I'm here to share, we're here today to share with you some information so that there's knowledge base that you can operate from in an effort in case we then need the commission to actually take a position on something. So the way that we have agreed to do this is we present the information to you in the public, and then in the future you may hear from us again. So for the sake of just reminding everyone, in case this wasn't done already, if it was, it can be done again. The Maryland Commission on African American History and Culture's mission is committed to discovering, documenting, preserving, collecting, and promoting Maryland African American heritage. And the commission provides technical assistance to institutions and groups with such objectives. And through the accomplishments of this mission, the Maryland Commission on African American History and Culture seeks to educate Maryland citizens and visitors to our state about the significance of the African American experience in America. So, in Maryland. So the reason we're here today is to tell you of an urgency that is occurring with our historically black colleges that we thought was resolved about a year and a half ago, and now it's back. How can I, okay. So what I want to do is just give you a little bit of information, and I'm going to ask Sharon Blake, who is our Maryland HBCU advocates, to actually come and give you more specifics. We also have an op-ed, and I think I have enough copies for everyone. So as Ms. Blake is speaking, I'll be handing those out to everyone as well. So in essence, I first want to thank the group that came up before. You were speaking of appropriate place for repose for human remains. Well, for those of us who are living today, repose is a goal not yet obtained. And I'm saying that because here we go again, and we're in a big fight again over due process violations of the U.S. Constitution when it comes to how the state treats historically black colleges. So it took 15 years to get a law passed to begin to make amends for the discrimination that was occurring with all of our historically black colleges. 15 years. You know how many years it took to break the law? 1. Because that's where we are right now. The law has already been broken. And so we are back in action again. I consider myself a preservationist. My friends call me a pack rat. I'm saying that because in essence, years ago, just a few years ago, there were some points of information that was important for us to talk about in terms of our historically black colleges, about underfunding is unconstitutional, for example. And it's amazing, but now I have to pull those out again to get them started. So without my going on, I would like for Ms. Blake, and we also have another member of our advocates here, to share the information with you about what's going on so that you know what we're going to be doing probably in the next number of months in order to get back to where we should be. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Sharon Blake. I'm the spokesperson for the Maryland HBCU Advocates, and I want to thank Cheryl for allowing me the opportunity to come before you today to inform some and remind others of the continuous fight that the Maryland HBCUs find themselves in on a daily basis. So I come today to speak to you about the most recent conflict. As indicated by Cheryl, there was a 15-year-long lawsuit put forth by the Maryland HBCU Coalition to end a dual system of higher education in the state of Maryland. A federal judge ruled that the state of Maryland was in fact practicing unconstitutional and intentional racist acts relative to the Maryland HBCUs. To that end, the remedy was to come up with a minimum of $1.2 billion to $2 billion is what the state of Maryland would have owed the HBCUs. However, there was a settlement of $577 million over the next 10 years to be given to HBCUs to develop unique high-demand academic programs that shall not be duplicated in order that HBCUs, historically black colleges and universities, get the opportunity to create competitiveness with the PWI's predominantly white institution. It was discovered during that particular lawsuit that the predominantly white institutions had 177 programs. The HBCUs in Maryland only had 11. So it was also ruled it was unconstitutional to hold a dual system. It was identified and documented that the state of Maryland intentionally withheld funds and created this dual system and wanted HBCUs to be inferior. So today we find ourselves in the fight again. Let me go back and say, to settle that lawsuit of $577 million, the Maryland State General Assembly passed Senate Bill 1 and House Bill 1 in 2021 to ensure the funding and to ensure that HBCUs would be on their way to begin to be competitive in the state of Maryland. It is that law to which Cheryl is referencing that has been violated. So we have the Maryland Higher Education Commission overruled their or its assistant secretary to grant Towson State University a business analytics program, administration PhD program. And as advocates, we have been involved in writing an op-ed that is before you to help spell out some of the wrongdoings that we believe have occurred, which in fact are illegal. We are planning to hold, in addition to publishing the op-ed, we're also planning to hold a press conference. And with that press conference, we plan to hold it here on Morgan State University campus. We will be sending a letter to the new higher ed commissioners, higher education commissioners, and we're going to request that they review and reverse the decision held by the June 14th higher ed commissioners to withdraw or overturn that decision made to grant Towson the opportunity to duplicate a program from Morgan State University in business administration analytics in the PhD program. The HBCUs will be working with the HBCU Coalition, the Legislative Black Caucus, the Speaker of the House, the President of the Senate, Senator Charles Sidnor. We're also working with members of the Maryland General Assembly to find an equitable solution to this situation where Towson has been granted the opportunity to begin a program immediately that would take, again, resources, money, staff, and a program from Morgan State University Business PhD program here. I will take any questions. I can say to you that you can contact us by phone at 410-934-0773, and you can contact us at marylandhbcu@gmail.com, or one other way of contacting us would be www.savemdhbcus.org. Yes, sir.
George Collins, you mentioned in your support the Speaker of the House, then you mentioned the President of the Senate, then you mentioned Charles Sidnor. So in addition to the President of the Senate, Charles Sidnor is leading advocate. Is that what you mean? Because you don't mean Charles Sidnor, President of the Senate, right?
The President of the Senate is Bill Ferguson, and I'm saying the key players, and thank you for helping me to make this clear, the key players in establishing and passing Senate Bill 1 and House Bill 1 in 2021 was the President of the Senate, Bill Ferguson, Speaker of the House, Adrian Jones, and State Senator Charles Sidnor. They were the key players there, so that's why I mentioned those, and thank you for helping me clarify that. Thank you so much.
Question. So the Charleston has been granted the opportunity to reproduce a program that's already here at Morgan. And as far as the appropriations go, have the appropriations under that same bill, the $577 million over 10 years, I guess it makes like $57 million a year, have the appropriations been forthcoming?
Yes. They started this year, as a matter of fact, yes.
Just curiosity, how many people in this room either attended a historically black college, has a family member who attended a historically black college, or a close friend who attended a historically black college? All right, there we go. We're talking to the right people. Thank you very much for your time. And again, I'll be back, so I look forward to future meetings as well. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you very much, everybody.
Commissioner Frisbee, I'm going to, because I think this is relevant, I'm going to call you up for your announcement for new business.
Unfortunately, this is a new call to arms. The fallout from the recent Supreme Court decision in the Harvard-UNC cases is spreading. The attacks on government and corporate minority business programs are ramped up. Basically the same argument that African Americans do not and have not suffered from systemic racism. We've already lost 2 important cases at the lower level. The first in Texas declared portions of the Minority Business Development Agency's assistance program to be unconstitutional. Recently, a judge in Tennessee, all from judges, declared that the SBA's 8A program was also unconstitutional, to the point that the SBA has presently halted its consideration of new minority business applications pending a review. It's obviously this is not, we're not sitting by the sidelines. There is a counterattack being led, and actually it's important, it's significant that it's discussed here because it's being led by the Minority Business Enterprise Legal Defense and Education Fund, which was founded by the late great Congressman Perrin Mitchell, who obviously had deep ties to Morgan. Also, the president of the fund is Anthony Robinson, who was a 1971 graduate of Morgan. But I just wanted to let folks know that the battle continues and it's getting worse. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Frisbee. So both of those items, we'll expect the historical committee to review, and by the October meeting, we should have some marching orders, whether it's a public statement, an official letter. But again, this is not going to be the commission that kind of sits idly by as the world is changed and goes back in time in some of the worst ways. The remaining two items of new business, and this is just something to be aware of, commissioners, and this is something that we will act on during the October public meetings. Commissioner Hunt brought to our attention at the retreat that the mission statement for the Banneker-Douglass Museum Committee is out of line, and that needs to be revisited. And there are also some additions that are going to be made to the advisory committee, but that will be something that will be coming down the pipeline, and you'll have that probably when they receive the minutes to review, so that we'll be ready to act on it for the October public meeting. And I believe that brings us to the end of our agenda. How are we on time? 1 o'clock. Okay, I'd like to start and end on time. I'm going to quickly just kind of go through the audience and allow those folks that have not already spoken to just kind of quickly introduce yourselves. We do appreciate your patience. We had a lot of information to get through, and I try to start on time and end on time and be respectful of time. But we know a lot of you came a long way, so we don't want to go without acknowledging you. We can start with you, and then we'll just move that way. Yes.
I'm Dr. Sherry Hudson, and I was invited by Commissioner Thompson.
Thank you so much.
My name is Past Master William Griffin, Masonic in Kent County. We owned the building for over 60 years, never knew it was the Rosenwald School. And we just found out like 2 months ago and was invited by Commissioner Thompson.
Thank you for coming.
I'm Linda Paez. I'm going to the Banneker-Douglass Museum, and I'm doing personal research on the enslaved people at Ocean Farm, along with other research to do with oral history. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm LaShawn Quander Mosley. I am a member of the Maryland HBCU Advocates. I'm also a member of the Quander family, the oldest and largest African-American family in the United States with documented history. It's very good to be here. Thank you.
Samia Kirchner, I teach here at Morgan, and I can't thank you all enough for taking on the HBCU degree replication issue.
George Collins, President of the African American Firefighters Historical Society, also a recipient of the African American Heritage Preservation Program grant, and new applicant, so we'll see how that turns out. And this was a great, it's always great, you all to put the work in. But this only confirmed how important this commission is when the MHT says you have a new leader, she hits the ground running, and she can come to this commission and get things done in a short period of time. That confirms how important this commission is. And for you new commissioners, it's a lot of work to be done. I mean, a lot of work they hold you to the fire, so hope you're ready.
Good afternoon, I'm Thaddeus Goodman, retired United States Army Colonel. I currently live in Frederick, Maryland, and I'm here representing Queen Chapel African Methodist Episcopal Church because we applied for the grant. I wanted to see how the commission works, what it does, and how it actually does its business. I met
Johnson.
I know the Johnson, your title. Chair Johnson, and the Director Johnson, they both came up to Frederick, Maryland, and we had an opportunity to present to them at that time. I just wanted to see the process. Thank you for that.
Thank you for coming.
Hi, I'm Patricia Wyatt. I'm with the Nanny Helen Burroughs Project. My husband and I advocate for Nanny Helen Burroughs. She's a student of Mary Church Terrell, who from Highland Beach, and also of Annie Armstrong, who's from the Baltimore area. So I wanted to see what the commission was doing, my involvement in history, Black history. So that's why I'm here.
Thank you for coming.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jade Moore. I was invited by Commissioner Kennedy Wilson. Thank you guys for your insight and for putting this together for the public.
Thank you for coming.
Hi everyone, I'm Thomas James. I was invited by Jamie in the Banneker-Douglass Museum. I'm an independent curator. I'll actually be curating a show at the Banneker-Douglass Museum next year. I'm also the executive director of the Last Resort Artist Retreat, which is an artist residency here in Baltimore that focuses on Black leisure and relaxation. I was happy to be here today. I see some familiar faces, which is amazing. I also consider myself a connector around Baltimore and Maryland. I'm a Marylander. So I'm glad to be here today, and I've been taking in everything, and I have some folks that I'm hoping to connect with here after this as well. Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Aisha Carey, and I am with Associated Black Charities. I am here to participate and hear the conversation, see how we can support, how we can engage, and move the work forward. I'm also a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, Baltimore Alumni Chapter, and I'm a resident of Baltimore.
All right.
Hi everybody, I'm Katie Calhoun. I'm the new president and CEO of the Maryland Center for History and Culture. I had the opportunity to spend a good afternoon with Director Johnson and Chair Johnson at our facility in Baltimore, and I'm here to learn more about the work of the Commission and find ways for us to support your work and for us to collaborate and partner in new ways. So thanks for having me.
My name is Miriam Stanicic. I'm the Community Relations Director at the United States Naval Academy, and we have a close relationship with Executive Director Johnson and with the Banneker-Douglass Museum. We are very privileged to have that kind of relationship. I'm also a member of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion team at the Academy. So learning from you and attending as many meetings as possible is very important to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for coming. Is the senator coming back?
I should not meeting.
Okay.
She's going to try to come back.
I was going to use a point of personal privilege, but when I saw her come through the room, it was like Verda Welcome was being channeled in here, and I would be remiss as a Morgan State University graduate not to acknowledge her presence and just how much we appreciate her. For those of you who are on this campus for the first time, or if you haven't been here in a while, Morgan now extends into Northwood Shopping Center. And it was her efforts with the state that largely made that possible. So we are forever indebted to all the work that she did, and it's not taken for granted. And she will forever be my senator, and we're just so thankful for her efforts. But again, everyone.
What is the name of that senator?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Make her Senator Emeritus. But I'm sorry, I got carried away. Remember everyone, August 26th, 10 o'clock a.m. Remember, commissioners, you are charged with at least getting one group to tour the museum before December and to begin collecting your contacts for our community partners. You heard those issues. Thank you so much again, Maryland Historic Trust. Anytime I hear about African American remains, I always think about the story of Sajarte Bartman and all of that. Those of you who know that history. So I'm really looking forward to Commissioners Green and Thompson and how you move forward with that committee and recommendations. But there's a lot of work to do. There are a lot of issues and a lot of fights that we're going to be involved with in the coming year. So let's roll up our sleeves and get it done. I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
I am on the Fund Development Committee. All boards that people belong to, and I know of course we have people belong to a whole lot of boards, you pay board dues. We don't pay board dues. I encourage you, every commissioner, because how can you ask somebody else to donate to something to which you did not donate? So I encourage you, you're all at different levels, to donate. Go on the Maryland Commission for African American History and Culture or the Banneker-Douglass Museum website and donate to the commission, to the Fund Development Committee. We need money to make all these things happen. The grants, if that's increased, but we need money to function for after-school programs and to get things done. So, donate, donate, donate. I'm the cheerleader for the donation money. Okay, so I'm Catholic, so I can beg for money. That's one thing we do well. So, you'll hear me all the time encourage you. I have a meeting coming up, and when there's a hole to fill, we should fill that gap. Thank you.
Last comment, Commissioner Hunt.
Nope, motion to adjourn. Sorry, didn't you say
Can I
you were
get a second? It has been properly moved in second that this August public meeting of the Maryland Commission on African American History and Culture be adjourned. Commissioners, I think there's something that's getting ready to happen with the audio visual, so just remain in your seats for a moment, please. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kara Hunt. I represent Prince George's County.
Good morning. My name is Commissioner Akim Tijani, and I represent Baltimore County.
Hi, I'm Commissioner Eleanor Thompson, Maryland Commission on African American History and Culture. I represent the great county of Anne Arundel County.
Wesley Wood, representing Baltimore City on the Maryland Commission for African American History and Culture.
Commissioner Wally Gill, Baltimore City.
Commissioner Jalen Money, representing Talbot County.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Ada Pinkston. I'm representing Baltimore City.
Hello, my name is Dr. Brian C. Morrison, and I represent Baltimore City.
Commissioner Janice Curtis Green, and I represent Baltimore County.
My name is Commissioner Kennedy Wilson, and I represent Frederick.
Commissioner Reggie Turner, representing Washington County.
Hi, I'm Commissioner Russell Frisbee. I represent Howard County, Maryland.
My name is Dr. Kaliaset Ahmed, and I represent Baltimore City.
My name is LaRon Herbert, and I have the lovely pleasure of serving as the Administrative Manager for the Banneker-Douglass Museum, as well as the Special Assistant for the Maryland Commission on African American History and Culture.
Hi, my name is Chanel Compton Johnson, and I am the Executive Director of the Maryland Commission on African American History and Culture in the Banneker-Douglass Museum, your state museum on Black history.
Hello, my name is Maya Davis, and I'm the Vice Chair of the Maryland Commission on African American History and Culture. I represent Prince George's County.
My name is Edwin Johnson, and I'm Chair of the Maryland Commission on African American History and Culture.